Okay, so Ambassador Jameson Greer was at a U.S. Senate hearing today. So for those of you that might not know who Jameson Greer is.
Thank you. Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee, I appreciate you taking the time today for this hearing. Last Wednesday, President Trump declared a national emergency in response to the large and persistent trade deficit that has built up in recent years. This deficit is driven in part by non-reciprocal tariffs, trading barriers, and other economic policies pursued by our foreign trading partners.
Yeah, so that's Jameson Greer. So what I wanted to do actually was just go over a couple of points from the opposition. We're going to be watching it from the AP. And speaking of the AP, a judge actually ruled that the AP has to be reinstated, stating that the government can't barge journalists. Normally when the politics align for some of these hearings, it's basically just softball questions, except Tom Tillis, but we'll get into that. But I can almost guarantee that based on these tariffs, Tom Tillis' phone has been ringing off the hook from some of his buddies.
Ambassador, as USTR's chief of staff in the first Trump administration, you oversaw the negotiation of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA, and the renegotiation of the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, the KORUS. President Trump signed both of these agreements. He called the USMCA a colossal victory, and KORUS a historic milestone.
True, it was.
And yet, with President Trump's new blanket tariffs, he is ripping up these agreements with our allies that we negotiated with. Why would any country want to do business with us, much less negotiate a trade deal, if we don't even honor our ongoing agreements?
Fair question.
So, Senator, we are the consumer of last resort. These countries have to sell here. They have, many of them, especially in Asia, have built their entire economies around exporting to us. They're very dependent on it, and that's part of why we have this huge trade deficit. With USMCA, those parties continue to enjoy duty-free treatment for many of the products that continue to comply with the rules that were set out 5 years ago. There's a big concern, Senator, that we did not have adequate other protections to stop the flow, particularly of like autos into the United States.
But there was a process for you to renegotiate that agreement this year. We talked about that in my office. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And it wasn't to do these blanket tariffs, correct?
What we have to address is an emergency, Senator.
That's true. And you should be honest. At least as you sit here, as you were in my office, be intellectually honest. Now, let me just ask this, because this is also true. And I so appreciate my Senator Langford asking this. Time matters. How long did it take to negotiate that agreement, the USMCA, that you were part of?
We did it at breakneck speed. We did it in about 2 years.
2 years. And now you're telling us you have nearly 50 countries coming to you, approaching you to enter in a negotiation. And you think that you can do that overnight?
India.
Man, you're pretty superhuman here, if that's the case. So let's be realistic. That's all we're asking. Common sense and realism here, Ambassador, as you sit here before us. And let me talk about something else that is really important for my...
Before she gets into that, specifically in regards to the USMCA deal, the deal itself was signed in January, and at the time it was being hailed as a new chapter for all three nations. Now, they hailed it as being a historic achievement, even referring to it as the gold standard of trade agreements. That was in January, but officially it went into full force July 1st, 2020. It replaced the old deal that Trump had said for a long time that it was a bad deal, NAFTA.
Ended the NAFTA disaster, the worst trade deal ever made by our country and by most other countries, too, and replaced it with the USMCA, which is the best trade deal they say ever made.
After this deal was made, the White House claimed that it would be mutually beneficial for North American workers, farmers, ranchers, and businesses, that it would create a more balanced approach for reciprocal trade supporting high-paying jobs for Americans and grow the North American economy. In other words, it was being hailed as a win for everyone. Now, what was the claim prior to? He said that Americans were being taken advantage of. So with this deal, it was supposed to create a more level playing field for American workers, including improved rules of origin for automobiles, trucks, and other products, and disciplines on currency manipulation, benefiting American farmers, ranchers, and agribusinesses by modernizing and strengthening food and agriculture trade in North America. So that being at the tail end of Trump's run, then you can understand why some people are a little bit skeptical that he's now going to get 50 nations, or in this case, 70 nations, or all other nations to play ball in the allotted time that he has, unless he pushes for a third term.
Not again.
President Trump signed both of these agreements. He called the USMCA a colossal victory, and KORUS a historic milestone. And yet, with President Trump's new blanket tariffs, he is ripping up these agreements with our allies that we negotiated with. Why would any country want to do business with us, much less negotiate a trade deal, if we don't even honor our ongoing agreements?
So, Senator, we are the consumer of last resort. These countries have to sell here. They have, many of them, especially in Asia, have built their entire economies around exporting to us.
And one other thing that she had mentioned also was she asked a question, which was, why would another nation that you just signed a deal with, why would they want to continue doing a deal with a nation that is basically at the whim of whoever's in charge at the time?
Here, Ambassador, as you sit here before us. And let me talk about something else that is really important for my state, and I think this entire country, because this administration is forgetting that we have $1 billion economy when it comes to tourism into the United States.
That's not.
People know Las Vegas. My state is Nevada. We rely on tourism to our state, and now we're seeing an impact because of these tariffs, not just from Canada, but I am hearing from so many that are in the tourism and kind of leisure industry. We are seeing impacts because now this $1 billion industry of international tourism is having an impact on our economy.
Especially poor Maine.
And this is a service industry. Let me just say this. I'm kind of offended by your testimony today that says we must accept self-inflicted economic pain, and I quote you by saying, to become an economy based on producing real goods and services. What does that mean? What does that mean to my service industry and every service industry across this country that relies on tourism and travel? That is the backbone, really, of part of our $1 billion economy. What do I tell them? That they just have to suck it up? That they're not really part of this real services? That you have another idea for the jobs that they should engage in? What do I tell them?
Oh, Senator, of course those are real services. The whole,
So what are you doing about the impact
the whole,
about, what are you doing about the impact of international tourism and now these blanket tariffs having a negative impact? What are you doing to address that?
the whole sentence, Senator, said that we need to get away from government spending as funding our economy and financialization, and we need to move to real goods and services, including the tourism you're talking about.
So
It's
what are you doing to
incredibly
impact the
important.
negative impact of tourism right now?
Well, one thing I'll say is we can't have the status quo, right? I keep hearing that we should have, essentially what I'm hearing is we should have the status quo. We should keep the $1.2 trillion trade deficit that Biden left us with.
I'm asking you,
and I don't think that's adequate.
what are you doing in this administration to address now the impact that you're having with these blanket tariffs, not targeted tariffs, blanket tariffs, on international tourism that is a big impact to our economy? What are you doing to address that?
Well, Senator, as we're talking to all of these countries, we are talking about services. We are talking about making sure that, you know, we can export services to other countries. A lot of those that we export are, you know, we have
Well, let
digital
me say I
services.
only have so
all
much
kinds
time,
of
and
trade.
apparently you're not. So here's what I would like, because you haven't thought about this, and the administration hasn't really thought about it, because I haven't heard anybody talking about tourism. So why don't you come talk to me in my office, and let's talk about and put a plan together, because these blanket tariffs are having an impact on tourism in my state and across the country.
Senator,
So
I'm happy to
instead
come
of
talk
just
to you.
defending it, why don't you just come sit down with some of us and try to address the concerns that we are seeing and feeling in our states that this administration has not taken into account?
One thing that she mentioned that I wish she actually pressed on when she mentioned economic hardship, that we must accept economic hardship. Not everyone can do that.
Have to reduce spending to live within our means. Yeah, that necessarily involves some temporary hardship, but it will ensure long-term prosperity.
Not everyone is positioned in such a way that they can just add on $3,000 to their expenses. Sure, if you're pretty well off, then you can kind of make some adjustments here or there, but for the most part, for people that were barely making it as is, tell them that prices are now about to just go up and that they need to just remain strong. Understand that some were barely holding on as is. All right, so let's do another one. So this is Ms. Cantwell.
I think my question this morning, though, starts with the consultation that Congress deserves on trade issues from the trade ambassador. And what did the Trump administration do to prepare us, to communicate with us, to tell us about findings as it relates to these emergency orders by the president?
Thank you, Senator. As you know, I find consultation requirements very important, and not just as a requirement, just a matter of good practice. Our staff, the USTR staff, in the past 2 months that we've been in office, have had over 200 formal engagements with staff on the Hill, obviously here in the Senate, also in the House. The day of the reciprocal trade announcement, we had our staff also up here briefing your staff. And we also had the president issue very publicly his America First trade policy memorandum, which specifically said that he was going to look into the trade deficit and the possibilities of tariffs.
So we've wreaked havoc on the economy by having one of the largest drops of the market. We have people's 401 in panic. We have retail organizations like the Retail Industry, National Retail Federation, American Apparel Industry, Outdoor Association, Consumer Technology, Computer Communications Industry, Main Street Alliance, Small Business Majority, all anxious, asking us to do something. And you're saying, well, some people have passed some notes to staff. What the requirement is, and this is where I believe the president has misconstructed and actually exploited this authority, is not communicated to us, nor these interest groups that are now panicked over the effect of tariffs. So I would say that the skill set of a USTR office or even a Treasury Secretary could have opened these conversations with these countries without the tariffs and saved a lot of people a lot of pain and anguish. I worry that this trust issue, because I have a different worldview, that we should be building alliances as a way to counter China, that the alliance building process now will become harder. And people are going to wonder, well, is the United States going to pull another fast one again and just wreak havoc, when in reality, countering China with a tech NATO or something like that is a more powerful tool. Do you have a comment about that?
I do, and I think we do need to be thoughtful about this. I think what we can't do is wait. We have had many times in past decades when we have had real robust trade disputes with our partners. Japan in the 80s and early 90s over cars, semiconductors, and they ended reshoring a lot of those factories here. And it didn't make us less of a security partner to Japan. I think we can have these conversations like friends do. And that's what the president said yesterday. He said, listen, China's trying to retaliate. They're taking a different path. But for others who want to have meetings,
I want to reclaim
we'll
my time for a second, because I only have 5 minutes and you have lots of time to answer lots of questions for members. But you can see all my colleagues, we are thoughtful people with specific issues about our constituencies. I just met with raspberry growers. They're concerned. They want to know if they're going to get some seat on a council so they can have their issues heard. I'm for trade. I represent trade. I represent a trade economy. I represent the success of what innovation and trade gets you. But you're coming here this morning with this not only tanking of the market and 401s, now you're coming here telling me that tariff is the tool. And I'm telling you innovation is the tool. You're telling us in your testimony you want a tariff on semiconductors. I'm saying that the last administration and this organization here passed the Chips and Science Act so we could reshore semiconductors here in the United States. So you're not going to win the innovation economy by tariffing semiconductors and reshoring that. I don't know what you think. I'm not trying to get the semiconductor. I want to lead on next generation semiconductor manufacturing, because I'm pretty sure I'm sitting next to the Intel ranking member here who's going to tell me if we don't lead on semiconductor manufacturing and semiconductor next generation technology, then we're not going to be leading in defense or in AI or in anything. So I want to innovate my way to that future, and I want to use the alliance power of different countries to force China and other people to follow us instead of this berating of the American consumer who has to pay the price for this policy.
Okay, so some of the leaders when it comes down to the semiconductor industry are like Samsung, AMD, NVIDIA, and even the TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. So specific to the Chips and Sciences Act, it was about $52.7 billion in subsidies, and it was really supposed to address one area. What happens when you're a country that needs stuff and you're dealing with another country that has stuff? Where did you see the negative aspect of this really play out? In the pandemic. During that time, everyone learned pretty quickly what it's like dealing with a nation that might not want to supply you anymore because they have to take care of their own. So in this aspect, I get the call to reshore. However, your enemy that you need to think about is not necessarily China, it's time.
Now he's a philosophizer.
Companies need time in order for them to properly reshore the items that they have. They have to deal with zoning. You need equipment. You need investors. You need to hire employees. You need to make readjustments to your supply. And then one other aspect that all companies have to now consider that are offshore. What happens if you make all these changes and another party comes in and they undo everything that was done? As you clearly see, at the flick of a pen, or Sharpie in this case, you can wave a lot of leverage. So now they need to consider, what's the likeliness that within 4 years, if we make all these adjustments, all the moves we make aren't just going to become irrelevant after a while?
Senator,
Mr. Chairman.
TSMC has announced a new announcement where they're going to have more investment here in the United States so they can make those things here and have that innovation.
Thank you, the people who voted for the CHIPS and Science Act in the past administration. Thank you for that. We are going to lead on innovation despite this administration.
Okay, so 2 more people.
To do that.
Without objection, and Senator Tillis is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Greer, thank you for being here. Back in the 90s, I was in management consulting, and there was a new platform that came out that promised to transform the business industry, ERP. Some of the early
Enterprise resource planning.
attempts at implementing the system proposed an alla prima approach. Let's do it all at once. Let's change the plumbing out. Let's get it all in, get it done, rip the Band-Aid off. It proved to be hugely unsuccessful. There were a lot of very visible projects, and the industry decided there needed to be a methodical sort of prioritization of what parts of the business needed to perform better sooner, and how do you layer onto that a comprehensive strategy. It looks like we've got a novel approach here in terms of an alla prima approach. I'm not a trade expert, and I'm not going to question it at this point. I do have a question about, at the end of the day, the other thing in management consulting we like to focus on is this concept of one throat to choke. In other words, when you're finally taking a look at a strategy, someone has to own it, and you can't say that it's the president or the vice president. So my first question to you, in this scenario, the decision maker who decided the alla prima approach, who has obviously had to have spent time anticipating what we saw in the markets and some of the pushback, I'm assuming this all got gamed out because it's a novel approach, it needed to be thought out. Whose throat do I get to choke if this proves to be wrong?
Right.
Well, Senator, you can certainly always.
No one. The answer is no one. Here's why. The people that are all within this administration, they're all following orders from the direction of one guy. So unless you're ready to choke out this guy, then I would insist you keep your mouth shut. Because right now he's number 47. When he was number 45, he had people around him that would actually give him some pushback. He had people around him that would tell him no. He had people around him that would tell him, Mr. President, I don't think that's a good idea. Have you seen the lineup? If you value your job, telling that man no is not something you use. So for Mr. Tillis, the volatility he's experiencing currently, it's not him experiencing it. More than likely, his phone has been ringing off the hook with business owners and millionaires and all kinds of wealthy folk that are saying, listen, you're going to talk to the ambassador. I need you to hold your own and grill him. And I need you to get those tariffs off. Why? Because I'm not just oozing money. I'm bleeding money right now. And if there's one thing with a wealthy person you do not mess with, is their money. So no, you're not going to choke anyone out.
Anticipating what we saw in the markets and some of the pushback, I'm assuming this all got gamed out. Because it's a novel approach, it needed to be thought out. Whose throat do I get to choke if this proves to be wrong?
Well, Senator, you can certainly always talk to me, but
are you at the tip of the spear?
Well, I'm at the tip of the spear for certainly.
Did you propose the alla prima approach?
So, first of all, I would push back, Senator, just a little bit on this. For now, we've excluded pharmaceuticals and semiconductors to take a different kind of approach.
So let's get
and
to
we've
another
excluded
question.
USMCA.
Section 232 and 301, we know particularly Section 232 is still on aluminum. Section 301 is Chinese imports, where there's no other provider. I overheard you say that maybe, or I thought I heard you say in response to another question, that for the near term there won't be any exclusions. Is that true of China, where they have said the U.S. is unilaterally bullying and completely groundless and they're going to fight to the end? Are the 232 and 301 tariffs exclusions on the shelves until we get to a reasonable agreement with China? I'm just trying to answer a question that I have several people in North Carolina asking.
Understand, when China means we will fight to the end, they literally mean they will fight till the end. So they're ready for this. You do understand that for the last 30 years, they've spent every day and every hour preparing for this exact same moment, and now it's here.
Agreement with China. I'm just trying to answer a question that I have several people in North Carolina asking.
So the president, again, is the final decision maker on all of these things, and he has directed that there not be exclusions or
There will not
exemptions.
be any exclusions on steel, aluminum, or any products that are only manufactured in China for the foreseeable future until China determines what the end is, because they said they're going to fight to the end. Again, I'm just trying to communicate
Yes, that's the
questions that I've
president's
asked, so there
policy,
will be
sir.
no exclusions.
Yes.
I won't waste your time asking for them. That's the main reason I wanted to ask the question. So again, I'm just trying to get my head around the logic of an alla prima approach, and I'm waiting to be, I'm waiting to see it be successful. But it just seems like we've decided to begin a trade war on all fronts, and that's okay if the person who thought this through has an answer for why you go after partners that we have a very long storied relationship with. Maybe we give some developing countries a break because we're trying to actually get their economies functioning, make them look to the West versus to Chinese investment.
That's what happens when you get rid of soft power, then you tariff Canada, then you tariff Mexico.
So it just seems like I'm getting my head around the alla prima approach. I'm not condemning it because I'm not a trade expert, but I still, at some point, and I understand that you are the trade rep. So if you own this decision, then I'll look to you to figure out if we're going to be successful. If you don't own the decision, I'm just trying to figure out whose throat I get to choke if it's wrong, and who I put up on a platform and thank them for the novel approach that was successful if they're right. But here's what I'm really worried. I'm not going to ask any more questions. I'm just going to tell you, every time
Turn your phone off.
we talk about people having patience, we need to understand that the founding fathers made damn sure that that patience was never more than about 14 months, really. Everything that we need to do to know what the political environment is going to be about next year, it's going to be done by February of next year.
Yeah.
So in your mind, do you believe that over the course of the next 14 months, we're going to have a level of certainty, and the people in the trailer park that I grew up in who are going to bear the brunt of some of these short-term cost increases, maybe some job displacement for a period of time, how are they going to be feeling Groundhog Day 2027 or 2020?
Well, so before he continues, the only reason why he puts out that 14-month window is because now you at least have some time to get your footing. You've analyzed the markets and the economy. And so within that period of time, you should have some stuff that's being rolled out. And that's usually around the window where you can feel if things are working or not. And then on top of that, midterms will be coming up as well. So if things aren't working, it's more than likely that the other party will win and that the other party might sweep. And if they sweep, then effectively, your presidency is kind of done.
Damn!
26. Do we feel like the majority of this will be resolved, and I'll be able to thank whoever thought that the alla prima approach was a good idea? Because that's about the timeline we've got to work with.
Well, Senator, these people who voted for the president, is the same situation I grew up in, you know that.
I agree, but let me just finish here because I don't want to get in the way of my
happy.
colleagues.
Yes.
I'll be 65 in August. Every day, 11,400 people celebrate their 65th birthday. That's 4 million a year. So there, let's say from 60 to 65, people looking at their 401k statements, they did vote for President Trump. They voted for me. I hope that they will again in both cases. Well, maybe not the president, but I intend to run for re-election. I'm just trying to figure out if they're going to feel good about this, because a long-term play in American politics and a long-term play in American policy, public policy formation, is about 12 months from the beginning of an administration. I wish you well, but I am skeptical. Thank you.
Okay.
Senator
Laughter in the
Smith.
background. Okay.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, so I did say that there was one more I wanted to cover, but I had to rewind on this one.
Mr. Greer, it's good to see you. And let me, first of all, completely agree with Senator Cantwell. I mean, I just don't get it. You know, the fact on semiconductors, why you gave a small exemption, you didn't exempt GPUs, you didn't exempt lithography equipment, you put a huge hit on Taiwan, where we need collaboration with the TSMC. I'm baffled. I mean, you're gonna hear from me what I'm sure you're hearing from most of us, incredulous about, I think, probably the worst economic policies that I've seen in my lifetime. And the data reflects that. A global tariff of 10 to 50%, on almost every worldwide country. Although, I will note from my Republican colleagues, you'll be probably glad to know that Russia didn't get a tariff increase. I believe that when all these global tariffs go into effect, I think most of them as of midnight tonight, tariff rate will be approximately 23%, highest since 1909. I believe that'll translate into the largest tax increase since 1968. We've seen the numbers of about $4,000 per family cost. Since Inauguration Day, more than $11 trillion has vanished from the market. And I will acknowledge that we got a little blip today, but I just talked to one of the senior folks in Wall Street, and he described today's market as a good day in hospice. I wouldn't use his name because, there are no good days in hospice, but that's kind of how I feel. And again, I know you guys are supposed to know more than all of Wall Street, but when every firm says, we're going to see increased chance of recession, and I've met you, Ambassador Greer. I think you're a smart guy, but I don't think just because this is the way Donald Trump wants the world to be for the last 40 years that he can simply will it into happening. In my state, the Port of Virginia accounts for $124 billion in trade. That amounts to about 500,000 jobs. Those are all up for grabs now. We got 800,000 small businesses in Virginia. These tariffs are going to wallop them. I had last week a guy in from a local brewery in Alexandria. The owner's name is Bill. He's got a triple whammy. He gets his Pilsner from Canada. He gets his bottle caps from Mexico. He gets his kegs from Germany. So already, even in advance of these all kicking in at midnight tonight, he's laid off 10% of his staff.
Damn.
Even if the president flips on all this, he's not bringing folks back. I mean, candidly, I had another guy in from who makes bourbon and sells a lot to Canada. He thinks it'll be a cold day in hell before the Canadians start buying American bourbon again, simply because our trust relationship has been broken. So I guess the first question I want to give, I'm trying to figure out what would be a question that maybe folks haven't asked. Let me ask you on this one. Australia is one of our strongest allies. We have the AUKUS relationship, which is key to their national security. It's key to our industrial base, so we can continue to build subs. Terribly important. Interesting thing with Australia is we have a free trade agreement with Australia. We don't have tariffs. Mm-hmm. We even have one of the few industrial countries. We have a trade surplus with Australia. So, Ambassador Greer, can you explain to me how it helps America's national security or our trading balance when we have, and I loved your fancy Greek formula, which was basically bad math on steroids formula, how with a trade surplus, with this strong relationship, Australia got hit with a 10% tariff as well?
No, they didn't hit someone with a surplus. The whole point was supposed to address tariffs, retaliatory tariffs that are being leveraged. That's what it's supposed to address. They would not hit someone with a surplus. And even if you use the math that they had, if a country is buying more than they're exporting, like Australia for one, isn't this supposed to be seen as a win? Right here, Australia trade summary. U.S. goods trade with Australia totaled an estimate of $51.3 billion in 2024. U.S. goods export to Australia in 2024 was $34.6 billion, up 3.1%, or $1 billion from 2023. U.S. goods import from Australia totaled $16.7 billion in 2024, up 4.7%, $745.7 million from 2023. The U.S. goods trade surplus with Australia was $17.9 billion in 2024, a 1.6% increase from $279.7 million over 2023. You had a surefire surplus in your reports and you still penalized them?
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
With this strong relationship, Australia got hit with a 10% tariff as well?
Senator, Australia has the lowest rate available under the new program. They ban, imports of American beef and pork.
Ambassador, excuse me. There is a trade. We already have a free trade agreement. We have a trade surplus. So getting the least bad, why did they get whacked in the first place?
We're addressing the $1.2 trillion deficit, the largest in human history that President Biden left us with. We should be running up the score in Australia.
Ambassador Greer, answer the question on Australia. We have a trade surplus with Australia. We have a free trade agreement. Why? They are an incredibly important national security partner. Why were they whacked with a tariff?
Good question.
Senator, despite the agreement, they ban our beef, they ban our pork. They're getting ready to impose measures on our digital companies. It's incredible.
With your Greek letter formula, the fact that we have a trade surplus.
We have a global tariff on everyone. We're trying to address the $1.2 trillion deficit
I think that
Biden left us with.
I think that answer, sir, you're a much smarter person than that answer. The idea that we are going to whack friend and foe alike, and particularly friends, with this level is both, I think, insulting the Australians, undermines our national security, and frankly makes us not a good partner going forward. The lack of trust from friends and allies based upon this ridiculous policy that goes into full effect at midnight tonight is extraordinary. I go back to what the market believers believe today is happening. A good day in hospice. I'm afraid if we keep these tariffs in effect, we're looking like an economy that will be in hospice.
All right, I'm just going to wrap up there. It was a wild hearing. They got the full coverage on AP News. They have it on Forbes and a couple of different platforms that you could actually watch the whole thing. It's about 2 to 3 hours, so whatever your thoughts are, leave them in the comment section. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like, and I will see you again on the next one. Do tariff someone with a surplus. Easy, y'all.